Jon's jokes keep coming one after another, each sharper than the last. He zeroes in on Karoline's age, pointing out how young she is compared to most people in politics. "You're practically a baby in this field," he says with a smirk, leaning back in his chair like he's just delivered the knockout punch. "How does someone your age even begin to understand the complexities of policy or governance? Did you learn everything from TikTok?" The audience bursts into laughter, clearly entertained by his playful jab. Karoline doesn't flinch. Instead, she tilts her head slightly as if considering his words before responding. Her calm demeanor throws Jon off for a split second. He wasn't expecting her to take it so well. But then again, maybe he was hoping she'd get rattled. That's part of his charm as a comedian. He thrives on reactions. When someone brushes off his teasing without missing a beat, it disrupts his rhythm. And that's exactly what Karoline does. "I'll admit," she says, her voice steady and measured, "there are days when I feel like I'm figuring things out as I go. But isn't that true for everyone, no matter their age?" She pauses, letting the question hang in the air for a moment. Then with a small smile, she adds, "Besides, being younger doesn't mean I don't care deeply about the issues we face. If anything, it gives me a fresh perspective, one that might be missing from some of the older voices in the room." Her response earns a smattering of applause from the audience, though it's clear they're still unsure where this is headed. Is she going to play along with Jon's banter, or is she about to push back harder? The tension builds as both guests sit there, sizing each other up. It's almost like watching two boxers in the ring, circling each other, waiting for the right moment to strike. Jon senses the shift in energy and decides to turn up the heat. He leans forward again, resting his elbows on the table. "Okay, fair enough," he says, nodding approvingly. "But let's talk about experience. You've been in the spotlight for what, 5 minutes? Meanwhile, others have spent decades working their way up. Don't you think that counts for something?" This time the audience isn't laughing quite as loudly. There's a seriousness creeping into the conversation, and they can feel it. Karoline takes a deep breath, looking directly at Jon. For the first time since the segment began, her expression softens. She doesn't look angry or defensive, just thoughtful. "You're absolutely right," she says slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Experience matters. No one would argue with that. But here's the thing. Experience isn't the only thing that qualifies someone to lead or speak up. Passion, determination, and a willingness to listen, they matter too. I may not have decades of experience, but I've worked hard every single day to earn my place at the table. And I won't apologize for that." The audience erupts in applause, louder this time. Some people even stand up, clapping enthusiastically. It's clear they're moved by her honesty. Karoline's words resonate because they remind us of something important. We all start somewhere. Success isn't always about how long you've been doing something. It's about the effort you put in and the impact you make along the way. Jon raises an eyebrow, clearly impressed. He wasn't expecting such a heartfelt response. Still, he's not ready to back down yet. All right, he says, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "I see your point. But let me ask you this. Why do you think people should trust you over someone who's been around longer? What makes you different?" Now it's Karoline's turn to lean forward. She looks straight into the camera, addressing not just Jon, but everyone watching. "Because I'm willing to admit when I don't know something," she says firmly. "And because I believe in collaboration, not domination. Too often, we elevate leaders based on how confident they sound, rather than how much they're willing to learn. I'm here to change that." Her answer silences the room. Even Jon sits back, momentarily speechless. It's rare to see him caught off guard, but Karoline has managed to do just that. She's taken his jokes and turned them into a meaningful discussion about leadership, humility, and the importance of diverse perspectives. The audience senses it too. They're leaning forward now, completely absorbed in what she's saying. For a few seconds, there's nothing but silence. Then, slowly, the applause starts again, growing louder and more enthusiastic. People are nodding, whispering to each other, sharing knowing glances. Something powerful has happened in this moment. Not just for Karoline, but for everyone watching. Jon Stewart, the master of satire, has met his match in a young woman who refuses to play by his rules. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jon breaks the tension with a chuckle. "Well," he says, shaking his head, "you're definitely not what I expected." His tone has shifted. It's less mocking, more respectful. "I came here tonight thinking I'd have a little fun at your expense, but honestly, you've handled yourself beautifully." Karoline smiles, her confidence shining through. "Thanks, Jon," she replies warmly. "And hey, maybe next time, we can skip the insults and just talk about the issues. Deal?" The audience laughs, relieved that the tension has eased. Jon grins, raising an imaginary glass in agreement. "Deal," he says, "but only if you promise to bring the same fire next time." As the segment wraps up, the atmosphere in the studio feels lighter, almost celebratory. The host steps in to thank both guests, praising them for their lively exchange. But it's clear to everyone that this wasn't just another late-night interview. It was a real, raw moment, a reminder that even in the world of comedy and entertainment, meaningful conversations can happen when we least expect them. Backstage, after the cameras stop rolling, Karoline takes a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment sink in. She knows she's made an impression, not just on Jon, but on millions of viewers tuning in from home. And while she's proud of how she handled herself, she also knows this is just the beginning. The road ahead won't always be easy, but tonight has proven one thing: she's ready for whatever comes her way. As the cameras cut to commercial, the energy backstage is electric. Karoline steps off the set, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of what just unfolded. A production assistant hands her a bottle of water, and she takes a long sip, trying to steady herself. She can hear snippets of the audience's chatter filtering through the walls. People are buzzing about the exchange, replaying moments in their minds. For Karoline, it's surreal. Just hours ago, she was pacing nervously in her hotel room, rehearsing answers to potential questions. Now, she's walking off the stage having held her own against one of the sharpest minds in comedy. Back in the green room, a few members of her team are waiting. One of them gives her a high five, grinning ear to ear. "You crushed it out there," they say, their voice filled with pride. Another chimes in. "Did you see his face when you called him out? Priceless." Karoline laughs softly, shaking her head. "Honestly, I didn't think I'd get under his skin like that," she admits. "But once I started talking, it felt natural, like I wasn't just defending myself. I was speaking for everyone who's ever been underestimated." Her words linger in the air, and for a moment the room falls quiet. It's clear this experience has meant more to her than just a successful TV appearance. This was personal. Growing up, Karoline had always been told she was too young, too inexperienced, or too idealistic to make a real difference. People would pat her on the back and say things like, "You'll understand when you're older," as if her age somehow disqualified her from having valid opinions. But tonight she proved them wrong, not by shouting louder, but by staying calm, composed, and authentic. Meanwhile, Jon Stewart is making his way to his dressing room, replaying the segment in his head. He's used to being the one in control. During interviews, the one delivering the punchlines while others scramble to keep up. But something about Karoline's response stuck with him. Maybe it was the sincerity in her voice when she talked about passion and determination. Or maybe it was the way she refused to let his jokes knock her off balance. Whatever it was, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd encountered someone truly special. Sitting down in front of the mirror, Jon stares at his reflection for a moment. "Huh," he mutters to himself, half smiling. "Guess I underestimated her." It's not often he admits that, even to himself, but tonight feels different. There's a lesson here, and he knows it. Comedy works best when it challenges people to think, not when it tears them down. And while his intention wasn't malicious, he realizes now that his approach could have come across as dismissive. Back in the studio, the host wraps up the show, thanking the audience for coming and teasing next week's guests. As the crowd begins to file out, conversations erupt everywhere. Strangers turn to each other, sharing their thoughts about the showdown between Jon and Karoline. Some are impressed by how gracefully she handled the pressure, while others admire Jon's ability to adapt mid-conversation. Social media starts, blowing up almost instantly, with clips of the segment spreading like wildfire. Hashtags like Karoline stands tall and Jon gets called out begin trending within minutes. For Karoline, returning to her hotel feels like stepping into another world. The quietness of the lobby contrasts sharply with the chaos of the studio. She sinks into a chair in the corner, scrolling through her phone to see the tidal wave of reactions online. Comments pour in from supporters praising her poise and courage. Even some critics admit they walked away respecting her more after the interview. One tweet stands out. Karoline didn't just survive Jon Stewart's roast, she turned it into a masterclass in grace under fire. But it's not just the praise that moves her. It's the messages from young people saying they feel inspired to speak up despite their fears. I'm only 20, and I've always been scared to share my ideas because people tell me I'm too naive. One comment reads, "Watching you tonight made me realize that doesn't matter. What matters is believing in yourself." Karoline reads these words over and over, feeling a lump form in her throat. This is why she does what she does, not for fame or recognition, but to remind others that their voices matter. The next morning, the story dominates headlines. News outlets analyze every moment of the exchange, debating whether Jon went too far or if Karoline's comeback was the highlight of the year. Talk shows invite experts to weigh in, dissecting the cultural significance of the moment. Some argue it's a turning point in how public figures handle criticism, while others see it as proof that humor and substance can coexist if done respectfully. Either way, everyone agrees. It's a conversation worth having. Karoline wakes up early, scrolling through the news before heading to a breakfast meeting with her team. They're riding high on the momentum of last night's success, brainstorming ways to capitalize on the attention. Offers for speaking engagements, podcast appearances, and even book deals are already rolling in. But Karoline insists on staying grounded. "This isn't about me becoming famous overnight," she tells them firmly. "It's about using this platform to spark change. If we lose sight of that, then none of this matters." Her team nods, understanding where she's coming from. They've seen firsthand how deeply she cares about the issues she advocates for. To Karoline, this moment isn't an end goal. It's a stepping stone. She knows the road ahead will be full of challenges, but she's ready to face them head on. After all, if she can hold her own against Jon Stewart, she can handle anything. Later that day, Jon appears on a morning talk show to discuss the interview. When asked about Karoline, he doesn't hesitate to heap praise on her. "She's the real deal," he says, leaning forward earnestly. "I went into that segment thinking I'd have a little fun, but she turned it into something much bigger. She reminded me, and hopefully everyone watching, that humor shouldn't come at the expense of respect. We need more people like her in the world." His words catch Karoline off guard when she hears them later. She hadn't expected him to publicly acknowledge the impact of their exchange, let alone compliment her so openly. It's a gesture that speaks volumes about his character, and it leaves her with a renewed sense of hope. Maybe moments like these can bridge divides, bringing people together instead of pushing them apart. As the day winds down, Karoline sits by the window of her hotel room, staring out at the city skyline. The lights twinkle like stars, casting a warm glow over everything. She thinks about the journey that brought her here, the late nights spent studying, the rejections that nearly broke her spirit, the sacrifices she made along the way. And she thinks about the future, knowing there's still so much work to do. But for now, she allows herself a small smile. Tonight, she stood tall, and tomorrow she'll keep moving forward, one step at a time. The next few days feel like a whirlwind for Karoline. Her phone doesn't stop buzzing, not with calls or texts, but with notifications from every corner of the internet. Social media is ablaze with reactions to her showdown with Jon Stewart. Memes are circulating, showing side-by-side images of Jon mid-joke and Karoline calmly responding. Bloggers write think pieces about the importance of grace under pressure, using her as an example. Podcast hosts dedicate entire episodes to dissecting how she managed to turn what could have been a humiliating moment into one of empowerment. At first, Karoline tries to keep up with it all. She scrolls through Twitter during breakfast, skimming comments and liking posts that resonate with her. But soon, the sheer volume becomes overwhelming. For every supportive message, there's a negative one. Someone accusing her of being overly defensive, another claiming she only got attention because she played the victim. It's exhausting, and Karoline knows she can't let herself get sucked into the noise. So she makes a decision: no more social media for the rest of the week. Instead, she focuses on what really matters: her work. Her team schedules a series of meetings to discuss the opportunities pouring in. There's an invitation to speak at a major political conference, a request to write an op-ed for a prominent newspaper, and even a chance to appear on a primetime news show. Each opportunity is exciting, but Karoline insists they approach them carefully. "We need to pick the ones that align with our values," she tells her team firmly. "This isn't just about building my profile, it's about making sure we're sending the right message." One project stands out: a non-profit organization focused on encouraging young people to engage in politics reaches out, asking if she'd be willing to partner with them. Their mission resonates deeply with Karoline, reminding her of her own struggles early in her career. She agrees immediately, knowing this is exactly the kind of work she wants to prioritize. "If I can help even one person feel less alone, then it's worth it," she says to her assistant later that day. Meanwhile, Jon Stewart's comments continue to make waves. In interviews, he openly reflects on the exchange, acknowledging that it made him rethink his approach to satire. "There's a fine line between humor and cruelty," he admits during a late-night appearance, "and sometimes we cross it without realizing." Karoline reminded me of that. She didn't lash out, she rose above, and honestly, that's something we could all learn from. His words spark a broader conversation about the role of comedy in public discourse. Some comedians push back, arguing that humor has always been edgy and provocative, that softening it would dilute its power. Others agree with Jon, saying that while jokes should challenge people, they shouldn't dehumanize them. The debate spills over onto social media, with fans weighing in passionately on both sides. Through it all, Karoline stays silent, letting the discussion unfold without inserting herself. She knows that sometimes staying quiet speaks louder than jumping into the fray. Back in her hometown, the reaction is especially heartfelt. Friends and family flood her inbox with messages of pride. Her mom sends a long email recounting stories from Karoline's childhood, how she used to stand up for classmates who were bullied, how she once organized a fundraiser for a local shelter when she was just 12 years old. "I'm not surprised you handled yourself so well," her mom writes. "You've always had a backbone of steel, even when you were little." Reading the email brings tears to Karoline's eyes. It's easy to forget where you came from when you're caught up in the whirlwind of success. But reminders like this ground her, helping her remember why she started down this path in the first place. It wasn't for fame or recognition, it was because she believed she could make a difference. And now, more than ever, she feels a responsibility to live up to that belief. A few days later, Karoline decides to take a break from the chaos. She books a flight back home, needing some time to recharge. Walking through the familiar streets of her small town feels like stepping into a different world. Here, life moves slower. Neighbors wave hello, shopkeepers call her by name, and the air smells faintly of pine trees. It's a stark contrast to the fast-paced energy of New York City, and Karoline savors every second of it. During her visit, she stops by the community center where she volunteered as a teenager. The director greets her warmly, pulling her into a tight hug. "We heard about your big night," she says, grinning. "Everyone here is so proud of you." They sit down over cups of coffee, talking about the challenges facing their town: underfunded, schools, limited job opportunities, a lack of resources for young people. As they talk, Karoline realizes how much she misses this kind of connection. In the midst of national debates and high-profile appearances, it's easy to lose sight of the everyday issues that affect real people. Inspired by the conversation, Karoline spends the rest of her trip meeting with local leaders and activists. She listens intently as they share their stories, taking notes and asking thoughtful questions. By the time she boards her flight back to the city, she has pages of ideas scribbled in her notebook. These aren't grand plans for sweeping policy. Changes. They're practical solutions tailored to the specific needs of her community. And that, she realizes, is where true change begins, at the grassroots level. When she returns to New York, Karoline dives back into work with renewed focus. She starts drafting speeches and articles that reflect the lessons she learned during her trip. Her tone shifts slightly, not away from confidence but toward humility. She talks less about herself and more about the people she represents. It's not about me, she tells her team during a brainstorming session. It's about amplifying voices that often go unheard. If I can do that, then I'll consider everything I've done worthwhile. Her shift in perspective doesn't go unnoticed. Audiences respond positively to her new approach, praising her authenticity and relatability. Even critics who initially dismissed her as inexperienced begin to soften their stance, admitting that she's growing into her role in unexpected ways. Behind the scenes, her team notices a change too. Karoline seems lighter, more grounded. The weight of expectation still hangs over her, but she carries it differently now, with purpose rather than pressure. As weeks turn into months, the ripple effects of that fateful interview continue to spread. Karoline becomes a regular guest on talk shows, not just as a commentator but as a voice advocating for meaningful dialogue. She uses her platform to spotlight issues that might otherwise get overlooked, from rural education to mental health awareness. Meanwhile, Jon Stewart occasionally references their exchange in interviews, always speaking highly of her. Their mutual respect becomes a model for others, showing that disagreement doesn't have to mean hostility. It can lead to understanding instead. Through it all, Karoline remains committed to staying true to herself. She knows the road ahead won't always be smooth and she's prepared for setbacks, but she also knows she's built something invaluable: trust. Whether it's her team, her audience, or the communities she serves, people believe in her because she believes in them, and that, she realizes, is the greatest victory of all. Months pass, and Karoline's life settles into a rhythm that feels both chaotic and fulfilling. The whirlwind of attention following her showdown with Jon Stewart has slowed down, but the impact lingers. She's busier than ever, traveling, for speaking engagements, meeting with advocacy groups, and working on policy proposals, but she's also more intentional about how she spends her time. Every decision she makes is guided by one question: will this help create positive change? One afternoon, she finds herself in a small auditorium at a community college outside Chicago. The room isn't packed. Maybe 50 people are scattered across the seats, but the energy is electric. These aren't policymakers or influencers. They're ordinary folks who care deeply about their communities. Some are students juggling part-time jobs. Others are retirees looking to stay active, and a few are parents hoping to leave a better world for their kids. Karoline stands at the front of the room, leaning casually against the podium, ready to listen before she speaks. "I'm not here to tell you what to think," she begins, her voice warm and inviting. "I'm here because I want to hear from you. What challenges are you facing? What solutions do you see that no one else seems to notice?" Her words strike a chord immediately. Hands shoot up around the room, eager to share stories and ideas. A young woman talks about the lack of affordable childcare in her neighborhood. An older man discusses the struggles of veterans returning home without proper support. Each story tugs at Karoline's heart, reminding her why she chose this path in the first place. After the event, several attendees linger to thank her. One woman approaches hesitantly, holding a notebook filled with scribbled thoughts. "I wasn't sure if my voice mattered until tonight," she confesses, "but hearing you talk made me realize maybe I should speak up more." Karoline smiles, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Your voice matters more than you know," she says earnestly. "And honestly, we need people like you, the ones living these issues every day, to lead the way." These moments keep her going when the days feel long and overwhelming. They remind her that while headlines fade and trends shift, real progress happens quietly, behind the scenes, through the efforts of everyday people. It's not glamorous work, but it's meaningful, and that's enough for her. Back in New York, Karoline sits down with her team to review upcoming projects. There's a lot on the table: a potential partnership with a national youth organization, an invitation to moderate a panel at a major conference, and even rumors of a book deal. But amidst all the excitement, Karoline pushes back on anything that feels superficial. If we're going to put our name on something, it needs to have substance, she insists during one meeting. I don't want to just check boxes or chase clout. Let's focus on initiatives that actually move the needle. Her determination inspires those around her. Her assistant, who started out starstruck by Karoline's growing fame, now admires her for entirely different reasons. She could easily coast on her reputation, they say to a colleague over lunch, but instead, she works harder than anyone I've ever met. She genuinely cares about making things better. Meanwhile, Jon Stewart continues to reflect publicly on their encounter. During an appearance on a popular podcast, he shares a story about running into someone who saw the interview. This guy comes up to me after a show and says, "You know, I used to watch you because you were funny. Now I watch you because you make me think." Jon pauses, letting the words sink in. That hit me hard. Because yeah, laughter is important, but so is learning. And Karoline taught me that humor can coexist with respect. That's a lesson I'll carry with me, forever. The comment catches Karoline off guard when she hears it later. She's sitting in her apartment, flipping through channels aimlessly when the host introduces Jon as the next guest. At first, she considers switching to another show, thinking it might be awkward to hear him talk about her again. But something stops her, a curiosity to see how far his reflections have come since that night. As Jon speaks, she notices a sincerity in his tone that wasn't there before. He's not just complimenting her, he's acknowledging the broader implications of their exchange. We live in a culture where tearing each other down has become entertainment, he says. But it doesn't have to be that way. If we approach disagreements with curiosity instead of contempt, we might actually learn something. Karoline reminded me of that. And I hope she reminds everyone else too. Karoline leans back on her couch, letting his words wash over her. For so long, she wondered if standing her ground that night had been the right move. Had she come across as defensive, overly serious? But hearing Jon frame their interaction as a turning point, for him personally and for public discourse in general, fills her with a quiet pride. It wasn't just about winning a verbal sparring match. It was about planting seeds of understanding. Inspired by the conversation, Karoline decides to write an article for a well-known publication. Titled, "Finding Common Ground in Uncommon Times," it explores the importance of respectful dialogue in an era dominated by polarization. Drawing from her own experiences, including her run-in with Jon, she argues that disagreement doesn't have to mean division. We don't always have to agree, she writes. In fact, healthy debate is essential for growth, but we owe it to each other to engage with kindness and empathy. After all, we're all just trying to figure this thing called life out together. The piece resonates deeply, sparking conversations online and offline. Readers share their own stories of navigating difficult discussions with loved ones or colleagues. Teachers use it as a discussion starter in classrooms, encouraging students to think critically about how they communicate. Even late-night hosts reference it, joking that Karoline might be the philosopher we didn't know we needed. Despite the acclaim, Karoline remains humble. She knows that writing an article won't solve the world's problems overnight. Change takes time, effort, and collaboration. Still, she allows herself to feel hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, moments like these can inspire people to take small steps toward bridging divides. As winter sets in, Karoline takes a rare weekend off to visit friends in Vermont. The snow-covered landscape feels worlds away from the hustle of the city. Bundled up in a cozy sweater, she spends hours sipping hot cocoa by the fire, laughing with old friends about nothing in particular. It's a reminder that life isn't all about work and ambition. Sometimes it's about connection and joy. On the drive back to New York, she reflects on everything that's happened since that fateful interview. She's grown, not just professionally, but personally. She's learned to navigate criticism, embrace vulnerability, and trust her instincts. Most importantly, she's discovered that staying true to herself is the most powerful thing she can do. Pulling into the city, she feels a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead will still have its challenges, but she's ready. Whatever comes next, she knows she'll face it with courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the power of human connection. The weeks that follow Karoline's trip to Vermont are a blur of activity. With the new year approaching, she dives headfirst into planning for the months ahead. Her calendar fills up quickly with commitments, panel discussions, keynote speeches, and strategy sessions with advocacy groups. But she makes it a point to carve out time for reflection too. Every night before bed, she sits by her window with a cup of tea, jotting down thoughts in a worn leather journal. It's become a ritual of sorts, a way to stay grounded amidst the chaos. One evening, as snow begins to dust the streets of New York, Karoline flips through the pages of her journal. She notices a recurring theme: gratitude. Entry after entry mentions moments where someone, a stranger at an event, a member of her team, even critics who challenged her ideas, helped her grow in unexpected ways. Gratitude isn't just about saying thank you, she writes that night. It's about recognizing how interconnected we all are. No one succeeds alone. This realization inspires her next big project, a podcast called Voices Across the Divide. The concept is simple, yet powerful, bringing together people from opposing sides of contentious issues to have honest, unfiltered conversations. No scripts, no agendas, just raw dialogue aimed at finding common ground. We spend so much time shouting past each other, she explains during a promotional interview. What if we stopped long enough to actually listen? The idea strikes a chord with audiences. Within days of announcing the podcast, thousands sign up for early access. Supporters praise her for tackling such a bold initiative, while skeptics question whether genuine understanding is even possible in today's polarized climate. Karoline doesn't shy away from their doubts. I get it, she says in response. Trust has eroded on all sides, but I believe in the power of conversation to heal wounds, even if it's messy and uncomfortable. The first episode features two guests with wildly different views on healthcare reform. One is a staunch advocate for universal coverage, the other a libertarian who believes in minimal government intervention. At first, tensions run high. Voices rise, frustrations bubble over, and it seems like the conversation might derail entirely. But then something shifts. Slowly, tentatively, they begin to ask questions instead of making accusations. By the end of the hour, they haven't reached agreement, but they've gained insight into each other's perspectives. When the episode drops, the reaction is overwhelming. Listeners flood social media with messages, many admitting they were skeptical at first but ended up moved by the exchange. I didn't agree with either side, one comment reads, but hearing them talk made me realize there's more nuance than I thought. Another adds, this is exactly what we need right now. Less yelling, more listening. Karoline watches the feedback roll in with a mix of pride and relief. Creating the podcast wasn't easy. She poured countless hours into researching topics, vetting guests, and fine-tuning the format. But seeing its impact makes every late night worth it. Still, she knows this is only the beginning. If she wants to create lasting change, she'll need to keep pushing boundaries. Around this time, Jon Stewart reaches out unexpectedly. He's launching a new documentary series exploring the intersection of comedy and politics, and he wants Karoline to appear in one of the episodes. You're the perfect person to discuss how humor can bridge divides or deepen them, he says during their phone call. Karoline hesitates briefly, unsure if revisiting their past encounter is the right move, but something about his tone convinces her. All right, she replies. Let's do it. Filming takes place in a cozy studio outside Manhattan. As cameras roll, Jon kicks things off with his trademark wit, teasing Karoline about her newfound fame. But soon, the conversation turns serious. They delve into the complexities of satire, discussing when jokes land and when they hurt. Jon admits he's still learning from their initial exchange, crediting Karoline with helping him strike a better balance between humor and humanity. "You reminded me that words carry weight," he says earnestly, "and that's not something I'll forget anytime soon." For Karoline, the moment feels surreal. Sitting across from the man who once tried to rattle her confidence, she sees not an adversary but a collaborator. Their dynamic has evolved into something deeper, a mutual respect built on shared values and a commitment to growth. When the segment wraps, Jon pulls her aside. "Keep doing what you're doing," he tells her firmly. "The world needs more voices like yours." As 2024 unfolds, Karoline continues to push herself out of her comfort zone. She travels to rural communities, urban centers, and everything in between, hosting town halls to amplify underrepresented voices. In Texas, she meets a group of immigrant families fighting for better education resources. In Ohio, she listens to factory workers worried about automation taking their jobs. Each stop reinforces her belief that policy decisions should be shaped by the people they affect most. Her efforts don't go unnoticed. A prominent magazine names her one of the year's most influential figures, citing her ability to unite people across divides. The accompanying profile highlights her resilience, describing her as a force of nature determined to rewrite the rules of public discourse. Reading the article brings tears to her eyes, not because of the praise, but because it validates the struggles she's faced along the way. Still, challenges persist. Critics accuse her of being overly idealistic, arguing that compromise often means sacrificing core principles. Others dismiss her work as performative, claiming she's chasing headlines rather than solutions. Karoline absorbs these critiques without letting them define her. "If I waited for everyone to agree with me, I'd never accomplish anything," she tells her team during a brainstorming session. "All I can do is stay true to my vision and hope others see its value." By summer, Voices Across the Divide becomes a cultural phenomenon. Schools incorporate episodes into lesson plans, book clubs use them as discussion starters, and community organizations host watch parties to spark local dialogues. Karoline receives letters from listeners sharing how the podcast inspired them to mend broken relationships or engage in tough conversations they'd been avoiding. "Your show gave me the courage to talk to my brother after years of silence," one note reads. "We didn't solve everything, but we started somewhere." These stories fuel her determination to keep going. She expands the podcast's scope, tackling topics ranging from climate change to criminal justice reform. Each episode reinforces her belief in the transformative power of empathy. Change doesn't happen overnight, she reminds herself, and her audience, during a live recording. But every conversation matters. Every effort counts. As autumn approaches, Karoline finds herself back in her hometown for the annual Harvest Festival. Walking through the crowded streets, she's struck by how much things have changed, and how much they've stayed the same. The faces around her are familiar, yet older. Conversations revolve around the same joys and struggles she grew up hearing about. Yet now she sees them through a different lens, one shaped by years of advocacy, reflection, and growth. That night, sitting on the porch of her childhood home, she reflects on how far she's come. From a young girl dreaming of making a difference, to a woman standing toe-to-toe with legends like Jon Stewart, her journey has been anything but predictable. But through it all, one thing has remained constant: her unwavering belief in the power of connection. "I don't know what the future holds," she writes in her journal that evening. "But I know this: as long as I keep showing up, listening, learning, and leading, I'll be exactly where I'm meant to be."